right, is everybody ready? Good morning, and thank you all for being here. This is the DAO's almost every weekly community press conference. In addition to going over some data relating to gun violence and other violent crime, we are going to be talking about a particular case. This is the recent conviction after a jury trial of a man named Jefferson D'Andrade, which I understand is spelled D-E-A-N-D-R-A-D-E. Mr. D'Andrade was just convicted of essentially an attempted carjacking, gunpoint robbery, firing a gun, doing some pretty horrific, pretty terrifying things back in 2020. But thanks to some very effective prosecution, some excellent police investigation, some forensics that were done the right way and were explained properly in court, thanks to all of that, a jury was able to quickly and correctly conclude that Mr. D'Andrade is guilty of this very serious crime. He will be sentenced, D'Andrade will be sentenced in September for this crime. I'd like to acknowledge some of the people who are here, and then we'll get into the substance. We have with us First Assistant DA Robert Listenby, ADA Joanne Pescator, who of course is the chief of the DAO's Homicide Non-Fatal Shootings Unit. We have the prosecutor who actually tried this jury trial successfully, and that is ADA Kenzie Johnson. That's K-E-N-Z-I-E, I believe. Kenzie will correct me if I'm wrong. Johnson, spelled the usual way, who is an assistant DA in the Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit. We also have with us Jessica Quiroz, who did the victim witness coordination in relation to this case, and Quiroz is Q-U-I-R-O-Z. I believe we have Deb Watson-Stokes here with us. How are you, Deb? As well. At any rate, let's just take a minute here. Last January, meaning January of 2023, during the mid-year budget process in the city, Philadelphia City Council funded two new initiatives at the DA's office. The first was the Gun Crimes Strategies and Prevention Collaborative, and the second was a carjacking enforcement unit. And I raise this, of course, because it connects very directly to the work that was done in this case. This work is in part a reflection of City Council's willingness to hear us and listen when we say give us a little bit and we'll give you back a lot, and that is what has happened here. Both of these initiatives provided support for the DAO to hire and also reassigned assistant DAs, victim witness coordinators, witness relocation specialists, and other support staff to be laser focused on the prosecution of prolific and dangerous offenders, specifically in the area of shootings, carjackings, car theft, and drifting activity with cars. Those funds also went to support those impacted by these crimes through robust victim services and support. We are grateful to the members of council who provided that support, to include Council President Kenyatta Johnson, Majority Leader Catherine Gilmore Richardson, Minority Leader Kendra Brooks, and to council as a whole, who have been very supportive of our efforts to go after violent crime, and we are seeing some positive numbers these days in relation to that. The case that we're going to be highlighting today is an example of how proper funding of modern enforcement and effective collaboration between law enforcement agencies will adequately support victims of crime and bring some sense of justice. This particular case presented a significant challenge, and it's a challenge that prosecutors see everywhere and all the time, which is there is reason to believe that the people who perpetrated this crime, the doers, as the police say, Jefferson D'Andrade, that they were specifically targeting vulnerable victims because they thought it would be easier to get away with it. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that there was a period of time within the Brazilian community in Northeast Philadelphia when there were a whole lot of carjackings and a whole lot of robberies going on. There is a very, very long history of American criminals from anywhere, targeting people who may be undocumented, understanding that those undocumented people may be afraid to go to the police, and therefore, this is a group to target. for criminal activity, not much different than what has been done for centuries, actually, to sex workers, who are often targeted by criminals, serial killers among them, because the belief is no matter what I do to this victim is so vulnerable, they will not engage with police for fear of being arrested themselves or otherwise having issues. That was a challenge in this case, and it was a challenge because this did occur in an area where the Brazilian community lives. Some of the people who were in the car were of that heritage, and there is reason to believe, as we look at some of the crime patterns and how many robberies were happening before the arrest of Mr. DeAndrade, there was reason to believe that this was a specific decision and a strategy at some level on the part, not just of DeAndrade, but on the part of a small number of criminals to cause havoc with that community and to get away with whatever they could. So on July the 2nd, there was, I want to get into some data around crime that I believe relates to this and also is just what we do every week, but I want to contextualize it for a minute. On the 2nd of July, there was a vigil that was held in relation to the mass shooting that occurred last year. It was held in an area near to 60th and Concessing. I was out there, G. Lamar Stewart was out there, we had a litany of people from this office who were there. We had actually reached out the week before to survivors of that horrific mass shooting because we knew the anniversary was coming and we knew that could be triggering for them. So we had been engaging when we found out there was a vigil, and of course we participated in that, hoping that there wouldn't be any excitement coming from that area. And then on July 4th, we had excitement coming from the area, unfortunately, and it wasn't good excitement, it was terrible. That was 9 people shot at 60th and Concessing. And so as I get into these numbers, I understand for a lot of people, they mean nothing because they have been so affected and so traumatized. They have seen how awful these incidents are, and it's just not how they feel. It's just not their personal experience. In no way do we want to demean or diminish that, but we have to be able to hold two things at once. That is a horrific mass shooting, 9 people shot. Last thing I knew, one of them was deceased, a horrific mass shooting. And yet at the same time, as we look at gun violence, this is what we see today. We see that in the last week in Philadelphia, this is from June the 29th through July the 5th, there were 4 homicides, 14 non-fatal shootings. Please remember, during the height of the pandemic, we were looking at an average of about 10.5 homicides in a week. This is 4. And you've been hearing news like that for quite some time, over the last 2.5 years, about those numbers coming down and down. There were 69 cases open that involved guns or gun violence. We also are seeing this. We are seeing homicides year to date, and that's as of last night, at 133. Last year, it was 221. The year before, it was 280. So we're well under half of the number of homicides from 2 years ago. We're 40% down from last year. The year before that, it was 287. Again, we're at 133. So we are well under half of the number of homicides at the height of the pandemic. It's actually very unusual. It's very remarkable. And as many of you know, there's been recent reporting indicating that Philadelphia is leading the major cities in the United States in terms of reductions. In relation to this case, I think it's worth taking a second to look at what has been going on with gunpoint robbery and with auto theft, because that was part of what was going on here. Gunpoint robbery as compared to last year is down 41.88%. 41.88% down in 1 year as compared to last year, according to the PPD's publicly available data set. And auto theft, which of course has been a real problem, especially when the price of used autos got high. Auto theft down 39.51% as compared to last year. So understanding how horrific this period of gun violence has been, how horrific the problem with carjacking and even car theft have been for Philadelphians, understanding all of that and without taking anything away from the accurate, truthful, honest feelings of people directly or indirectly affected by it, we also have to hold the reality that on the numbers, things are getting a whole lot better, and a whole lot better in ways that are frankly uncommon in the history of criminology in this or any other city. All right, at this time it is my pleasure to introduce Kenzie Johnson, who is the prosecutor who brought home this victory before a jury trial. I'm going to let her come up and explain about the case. We have two pieces of video. They're both under a minute. I believe we can make them all available as a link later, but regardless, we're going to be showing them. One is going to be a sort of a grainy video of the crime itself, and I'm going to ask ADA Kenzie Johnson to narrate that and explain it. Another one is going to be with no sound, but that will be a video that was actually taken by the primary victim in this case, who did testify at trial. What that will show, among other things, is a bullet hole in the car that was targeted by these individuals. There's also some photography, and most importantly, that photography is going to have to do with the forensics that helped to solve this case. It has to do with a big fat palm print on the car window, palm print that belonged to Mr. DeAndrade. Part of the trial of this case involved the presentation of fingerprint, palm print forensics to a jury. Part of it involved the primary victim providing her own testimony about what occurred in a way that was very credible, and also making an identification in this case. But rather than my going on and telling you more about this secondhand, I'm going to invite Kenzie Johnson to come forward now and describe this. We will do Q&A at the end, so please do not ask Kenzie any questions just yet, but we will make her available during Q&A.
Good morning. This case happened in February of 2022. It took place when 3 young teenagers were on their way home from a church event at work, where they had been working in the nursery, volunteering for their church. Now, as the victims were driving each other home to drop them off at their homes, the defendant, along with 2 other individuals, surrounded their car in masks and displayed a firearm. That firearm was tapped upon the driver's side window of the victim's car, and then that firearm went off. It left a bullet hole in her driver's side door, and in that moment, the victim told me, actually, and she told the jury that she prayed and that her God told her to drive, and she did. She drove away and she left the masked man, who was later identified as Jefferson DeAndrade, behind. Now, there is a video which was retrieved by another member of the community who was not willing to come forth to the police themselves, but they did pass this video along through other members of the Brazilian community, and it eventually did end up in our possession. And that video does show these masked men surrounding this teenager's car and attempting to take it from her. Now, there was also, as stated by the district attorney, a fingerprint, actually multiple fingerprints, that were left on that driver's side window. As the defendant was brandishing and pointing that firearm at the victim, he placed his left hand directly on her window. Now, that was eventually retrieved by members of the Northeast Detective Division, and it was sent to the latent print laboratory at the Philadelphia Police Department. They were able to match those fingerprints directly to this defendant, Jefferson DeAndrade. And once we had his name and his photo, we were able to show it to the victim. And even though he was wearing a mask that covered all of his face except his eyes, she knew it was him. She knew it was him. She said she recognized his eyes. And, you know, I want to thank the members of Northeast Detective Division, including and especially the carjacking task force, because this case occurred during a wave of carjackings and gunpoint robberies which were occurring in the first half of 2022 within the Northeast, and specifically within the Brazilian and Portuguese-speaking communities of Northeast Philadelphia. As the DA stated, a lot of these actually stopped and dropped off after this particular defendant was arrested. And now with his conviction, I hope that this is a testament to the fact that it does not matter where you're from as a victim. It doesn't matter what your immigration status may be. It doesn't matter what language you may speak. The Philadelphia Police Department and the District Attorney's Office want to seek justice and accountability for you. We want to keep you safe, and we do have reason to believe that there are other victims of this defendant, Jefferson DeAndrade, that are still out there. And I hope that they will consider coming forward and give us the opportunity to fight for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office in 2018 started a brand new unit. It was an immigration unit. It had multiple purposes, but one of its main purposes is to interface with ICE in order to obtain visas that are protective of victims of crime and protective of witnesses to crimes regardless of who the victim is, regardless of who the defendant is. This is something we have been doing for years. It has enabled us to have some very important prosecutions, including a prosecution of a member of MS-13 in a shooting matter some time ago. But there are literally scores of cases in which we have been able to obtain specific protection from the U.S. government and from ICE in order to enable victims of crime who are undocumented to participate in the court system and to help us bring people to justice. We will continue to do that. So if there are victims out there in the Brazilian or any other community who are afraid to come forward because they are afraid that they are going to be deported, please understand that we have had tremendous success in getting ICE to put those people in a more favorable position than where they started after a crime in order to make sure that they are able to have even-handed protection and that the court system works. It is not at all uncommon that we have an undocumented witness, and we need that witness because a U.S. citizen who is a victim has been victimized by a U.S. citizen who is a criminal. So this ain't just about undocumented people. This is about everybody, and it's about protecting everybody so that we can do our job in an even-handed way. All right. Now, having said all of that, I think we are at the point of Q&A. Let me just check, make sure I didn't miss something. All right, if I have not called on any of you or you showed up a little bit late, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to ask your questions. So let us start with Sherry. Sherry Stone, how are you? I'm going to ask Kenzie to come forward. You've got to talk to me.
There were 3 teenagers in the car. 3. So the primary victim in this case was 17 years old at the time. I don't have the date of birth of the other 2 teenagers in the car, but it's my understanding they were all around the same age.
All right, thank you, Sherry. I know I'm going to mispronounce this name. My apologies. Jack? Yes. How do I pronounce that? Tomzuk. Okay. All right. Mr. Tomzuk, what do you have?
Maybe I missed a couple of places, the date and kind of the blockade, where the location where this property occurred.
Sure. So this was on February 27th, 2022. In the Northeast on Castor Ave and North Fonts Street. Yes.
And another question I have is, what made you think that this defendant is targeting the Brazilian community specifically?
That is correct. He does have one other open case at this time, which is also targeted towards members of the Brazilian community. The defendant himself is from Brazil, and like I said, this was during a time where there was a wave, a surge of these carjackings and robberies that were occurring within that community. So much so that members of the DA's office and Philadelphia Police Department had several meetings with members of that community. And it's my understanding, based on working on this case, that it's a very close-knit community. People talk, people know each other, people recognize each other. So a lot of the intel that the DA's office and the police department received was word of mouth, friends and neighbors informing each other about what was going on within their community.
Can you say what church they're involved in, or?
I will not. I'm not going to speak to that, just for people's safety.
Thank you, Mr. Tomzuk. All right, let me see. Kristen Johansson. Yes.
Two questions. One, and this is on the topic from over the weekend. We had, I don't know if you, is there any updates, progress?
No updates. Of course, the police are working on it around the clock, doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. But of course, if anybody has any information, you can remain anonymous. 215-686-3033, 3034, the Philadelphia Homicide Unit.
And the second question, sorry, but the office, I understand, there's the city workers coming back, the mandate from the mayor. Will your office be participating in that? Will everybody have to come back to work full time?
We are following that closely, even though this is an independent elected office, we generally do the same things as other city workers. Obviously, it's a little complicated here because there is a new lawsuit filed by one of the unions, a union that works in this office, that is seeking a different arrangement. So what I can tell you is that we intend to be aligned with the city's policy. This is an office that not only has a lot of non-union workers, but it has workers from multiple unions. So we have to try to figure out what makes sense, what is equitable, and we are looking forward to meeting with and speaking directly to the mayor in more detail about where she intends to take this in light of that lawsuit and the position that is being taken by many other city workers. Do you have anything else? No. All right, thank you. All right, Bill Siders, 3, CBS. Nothing? All right, thank you. Chris Edmondson, anything? All right. Is Tom McDonald here? Tom,
Trying to get a good picture.
are you,
Are there any other
are you a deer hunter? Because I got to tell you, it's got to be at least the second or third time that you were in a deer stand and I couldn't see you. But it's nice to see you, Tom.
Are there any other disadvantaged communities who are seeing a similar pattern?
In terms of carjacking or just violent crime? I will speak generally to it, but I would also invite anyone else who has information on this topic to jump in. We have, for a very long time, seen a pattern of victimization of undocumented people who were either of Mexican national origin or Central or South American national origin. Not uncommon to have somebody driving his van up with a bunch of tools in the back after 14, 15-hour day, and maybe the 7th day that week of it, only to be targeted by American criminals who are going to try to take advantage of that community based upon the idea that they are so endangered by ICE policy or so endangered because of their status that they won't come forward. We've certainly seen that for a long time. But Tom, it's also not the most detectable thing, because if people do not even call the police, then we have no record that a crime ever occurred. So we have seen that. There's a very, very long history, as you know, nationally, internationally, locally, of the targeting of sex workers. It really boils down to this. People who want to do terrible things are looking to get away with it, and one of the ways to get away with it historically has been to pick vulnerable victims. Part of what drives our policy in relation to sex work, part of what drives our policy in relation to people who are suffering from addiction but are not committing serious crimes, is that we are trying to make sure that everybody's protected, because we don't want those crimes to occur in the first place. Anything else, Mr. McDonald? All right. Is there anyone else? Did I miss anybody? Yes, please.
Just on the Nash Street, has there been any video collected? Was that
I'm sure detectives are out there working around the clock, like I said, but please, if anybody has any information, video, the littlest thing that you have might be really important. I would just ask that you call the homicide unit, 215-686-3033, 3034.
All right, well, is there anyone else? Did I miss anyone? Yes, please.
Are the victims in this case undocumented carjacking?
I can tell you that the primary victim, the one who testified at the trial, is a U.S. citizen, but is still a member of that community in the sense that it's a community of people of Brazilian heritage in the Northeast.
And is there any other suspects you're looking for? Is this suspects, other people involved in this crime?
There were certainly co-conspirators. If the video were working, I would show you all of them. But we don't have any information as to who they may be. Most of these robberies and carjackings that were occurring involved groups of 2, 3, 4 young males. And, you know, if anybody has additional information about these individuals or about these groups, even though it was over 2 years ago now, you are still encouraged to contact Northeast Detective Division. And, you know, hopefully we can locate and identify more of them.
All right, are there any other questions at this time other than what happened to the video? I will get to that question shortly. Are there any other questions? Let me just check on the status. We're having some technical issues there, but regardless, if we're not able to play it now, we do intend to have the link available shortly with our press release. But I'd rather have it narrated if we can do that. Sorry.
I say we'll play on the laptop.
Fonts Street, F-A-U-N-C-E, and Castor.
All right, well, feverish work goes on still. We can play it on a laptop if it's of help to you to gather around the laptop, even if we can't get the larger screen to play it, so that it can be narrated by Kenzie Johnson, and then we'll give you a link. We can do that. Uh-oh. Oh, my goodness. All right. ADA Johnson, I'm going to ask you to come forward, and assuming it works, I'm going to ask you to narrate it.
Push it, listen, push it to the right so it goes to the next one.
Almost.
Coming out? Yeah, keep going. In other words, hold and drag.
No, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, just keep going, right there.
You got it.
Yeah, you got it.
All right.
Now you go. Now you got to apply it. Space bar.
Wait, don't yet, not yet.
There it goes. No, you had it. Right there.
Elliot, don't play it yet. Just hold on. Oh, it's playing. Okay. Let me just make sure all the cameras are lined up. All right. Are you all set, or do you need a minute? Good. Okay.
Elliot, can you start at the beginning? Just so we can. Maybe not. Oh,
We'll get it back. Bring it back up. Bring it back up.
He needs a job.
I think that'll work. So as you can see, we have 3 masked individuals, and they are coming from a back street where their car is actually parked. The victim's car is a Mini Cooper. You can see it double parked in the middle of the street. And at about this point, you can see that she begins to notice the individual is behind the car, and she's going to lock the door. And as you continue to watch, you'll actually see a flash right then of the gun going off. And then the victim had the fast thinking and bravery to just drive away. And then at this point, they ran back to a alley access street on the other side of this residential property and got into their getaway vehicle. And as you can see, this is a video taken on someone's cell phone. We don't know who took it. And it shows someone in the neighborhood who wanted to provide this information but did not feel comfortable doing so. But we're thankful for it because we were able to play it at trial, and the jury was able to see it.
Play it again? Yeah. All right, Ellie, can we play it one more time first? Oh, we'll go to the other video. Re-rack. Second one, right? The old days, press play on the phone. Yep, good. Keep going? Yep. Yes. Yeah, right there.
The victim's court in the whole park.
Right next to the video. Elliot, can you go to the second video, please?
Yeah, so you could see, it's one of those that the more you watch it, the easier it is to see.
The shot is right before the
Yeah. I did. Well, I didn't say it like that because it seemed a little dishonest for me to say it because it wasn't me. But she did. It's true.
So for a second, a little square box came up with the number 3 in town.
Okay.
It came up in the lower left.
It's still working, just to show what we all want, just do the whole thing. Get the identifier. That should be, this is three.
Yeah, the 3 box was visible.
Yeah, that's. It's 3? Yeah. So you want to say something? Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Okay, so whatever you got on your main screen is going to show up here.
Yeah, it does. I just have to get that.
There, you had it.
It's coming up now.
Bottom, yeah.
Make sure you turn the sound off. It's pretty loud. Great. So this is a video taken by the victim. As you can see, that's the gunshot, the bottom of her car door. And you can see the handprint still visible. And the victim believed that that was from him dragging the gun across the rear driver window prior to coming. Yes, coming to the driver's front window. Well, so that's the driver's side door. So to me, it looks like it would have been about foot or lower leg level. The bullet was eventually recovered by the body shop that did some work fixing the car. It was still in the door. So thankfully, the door successfully stopped that bullet. And it's not clear whether it was fired on purpose or on accident, but what we know was on purpose was pointing the firearm directly at the victim who was seated in the driver's seat. And that's a still image of that entire handprint that was left. And as you can see here, this is a work product from the latent print lab at the Philadelphia Police Department. On the left is a fragment of what was taken off the vehicle. I believe this one, I think, is either the middle or the left index finger. But you can see on the right, this is Jefferson DeAndrade's fingerprints that were already in the system. And from a combination of both the technology which exists and just good old-fashioned looking at the marks and looking for points of minutia that match between the two fingerprints, the latent print laboratory was able to confirm that that handprint did in fact belong to the defendant.
Thank you, 88 Johnson. You know, to me, this image really kind of tells the story, because in the lower right, you can see the exhibit sticker that says Commonwealth's Exhibit 11, which of course is what you apply before you introduce something into the record. This was such an important piece of evidence, it had to be part of the case. It was used in the case, and it was used specifically because it was going to take this case from an identification to a level of forensic certainty that, as you might expect, turned out to be so overwhelming to a jury that they came in with a guilty verdict within a couple of hours. Can't say enough about the value of forensics, so I won't say it, because I think that image says it all. All right, are there any other questions? We will make these links available with our release so that they can be used. The videos, at least the first one, were introduced in court, correct? Was the second? All right. These are all public records at this point because they were introduced in court. So we will make them available to the media in our release, which it will be out, I guess, within less than an hour or so. All right. Thank you very much.
When did this conviction take place?
About a month ago.
Sentencing in September. All right. Thank you all.
It's okay if you talk about my shoes. I'm just messing with you.